One fly that is very famous that I think everyone will recognize is our second fly of the night. There it is in all its glory. It's Lefty's Deceiver. Probably one of the most famous flies on the planet. Lefty's Deceiver, Clouser minnow, woolly bugger are probably the top three streamers of all time. We caught more fish on these than any other 20 patterns combined. The Deceiver was a very good idea. So what happened was Lefty was fishing Chesapeake Bay for striped bass, you know, in like offshore situation. And he was looking for something to mimic the smelt in the area, which is one of their bait fish. And of course he wanted to do it with a fly. So he created the Deceiver, and it's deceptively simple, but it just fishes so well. So you've got a lot of different things going on here in a small package. You've got some, you know, rooster saddle hackles back here that really move like the tail fin of a bait fish. You've got a little bit of flash work in there, which you can just see in the camera there. And then through the middle of the fly, it doesn't really matter what you have, kind of like on the meat whistle. I've got some of that Palmer chenille under there. And then the front collar is reverse tied bucktail. Now on the original Deceiver, they did not have reverse tied bucktail. He tied it in front ways, and then he built up a big head and then put some epoxy over that head and drew on eyes and stuff like that. But we've got some modern stuff now that we can reverse tie and create a couple of different dynamics that I'll talk about here in a minute with this streamer. And I've got some 3D eyes on here, and see, it gives us a little bit wider profile to the fly, which I think is cool. And then on the underside of this bucktail, we've got you can see the butts of the bucktail. Now, bucktail is hollow. Not as hollow as deer body hair, but it has some hollow nature, especially as you get down towards the bottom of the bucktail, the part that would have connected to the deer's body. You have more hollow ends of the bucktail. And hollow trapping air makes this fly more buoyant. So it's a really cool kind of neutrally buoyant fly where you've got this big, fat, wide gap streamer hook under here. This is a size 1 Gamakatsu B10S. And you've got the heaviness of that hook keeling the fly. That means that keeling means that it's going to seat the fly straight up and down in the water so that it actually looks like a fish, right? It's not going to lay to its side or something like that, or flip over upside down. It's going to sit correctly because all of the weight is down here in the bottom of this hook. And you've got buoyancy in the hollow bucktail on top of the fly. So I just wonder if he meant to do all of these design elements when he created this fly, because it is one of the most popular flies in the world, especially for saltwater fishing. And for smallmouth bass, I like it in about this size. So we are at, I think we're right at 3.5 inches with this little guy. Yeah. So he's not real big. 3.5, 3 3/4 inches, up to a 6-inch fly. If I'm going 6 inches, I sometimes will articulate it to get a second hook in there. I can show you what that looks like. So here's another Deceiver. This one is a 6-inch Deceiver, and it has a second hook back here in the back. So another really great color combo. Hint, hint, for smallmouth bass, olive and yellow. Don't know why they love that, but that's a good one to try. But this has been my most productive color in 2020 was this color right here. So this color combo is called Cotton Candy. So it's white with very light blue and light pink on top. Now, if you weren't able to find those colors bucktail, I don't blame you, because they're kind of a pain to find. If you have just white, just go with straight white, because it's very visible and it's probably one of the most effective colors for smallmouth, just straight white. So if you've got that, that's cool too. So that's what we're going to tie. Lefty's Deceiver, an old fly. I think he came up with this in the 50s. But it's a fantastic pattern. And I'm going to show you a couple of little modern differences at the head here when we reverse tie the collar. So let's jump in, because this one takes just a little bit of time. All right, so remember we're going to come in with the Gamakatsu B10S. Any streamer hook will work as long as it's heavy wire, and I really like wide gap so that we can get to those smallmouth mouths a little bit easier. These B10Ss have a really small barb on them, but I'm going to come in there and pinch that thing anyway. Pinch that barb out of there. Let me get this seated a little bit more parallel there. There we go. There we go. All right, so then I'm going to come in with my thread. And on this one, I don't necessarily think thread is important until you get to the head of the fly. When you get up here to the collar and you start having to reverse tie bucktail, I think a strong thread is really helpful. So you can't see the name on this thread, but it's GSP 100 in white. And they have this just about anywhere. They have it at Merton's. A 210 would probably work, like a Flymaster 210 would probably work too. So let's just lay down a thread base. Okay, this GSP, if you got GSP and you've never tied with it before, practice with it a little bit. It has no stretch in it, so it probably feels weird in comparison to most threads, and it's really slick. So if you're not used to working with it, just add a little bit of wax to it, and that makes it stick really well. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do, and this is not in the original pattern, this is something that I added because I think that it helps reduce fouling. So instead of just lashing on these saddle hackles out back, I'm going to put down a little bit of kind of like an underbody of bucktail, or more like, it's more like an undertail. So I'm coming in with this white tail. Shout out to my awesome dad who came across just a whole bunch of deer tails a couple of years ago, and I'm still using them. So this one is actually cured by Roger Stewart that's on here right now. He laid it out for me, and this bucktail I like to use for my small deceivers because it's just about 3 to 4 inches long, and it's not really long bucktail. I'll save that longer bucktail for my bigger, longer flies. For a small fly like this, using that smaller bucktail works great. And now remember, on the tail end, we don't want a lot of hollowness in the bucktail, so we're going to use up here towards the tip of the bucktail. There'll be less air in these. They will be less buoyant fibers. So down here at the base, we'll have much more air in these fibers. Those are the ones that are great for using on the head, but they're not so good for using in the tail, or we just don't want to. We want to save those, right? So I'll grab a little piece, probably a quarter of a pencil. Usually they talk about, whenever we talk about using hair, we talk about pencils. So I've got maybe a quarter to a half of a pencil. I think I probably got too much, to be honest with you. So I'll pull out kind of the shorties. I only want the long ones. I'm gonna come in here and try to make about a 4-inch fly. Try to get an idea of where that's going to be for me. All right, so I want to go pretty much to the back of where my vise kind of meets that rotation section. So take that bucktail and go almost back to there, not all the way, right? Because we want to leave a little bit of room back here for the movement of the saddle hackles that we're going to put on there. So what I'll do is I'll push the bucktail into the shank and then grab it with the other hand. And what that does is it seats it around the shank so that it's not just on top, it's completely all the way around the fly. And then this will add a little bit more buoyancy in your fly too. You see, I'm just lashing it down to the top. I'm going to come in here, put a few more wraps. Just like that. I've got about 2/3 of the way up the head. And then I can go ahead and clip out the extra. Okay, because I'm going to have plenty of buoyant materials when I get to the head of this fly. So I don't necessarily need to run that little tail piece all the way up there. And that's just something that I do. You don't have to do that. I've found that it helps reduce the fouling of the saddle hackles is the reason that I put that little undertail in there. Then we're going to come in with saddle hackle. I was talking to Rick just at the beginning of our program. Most of the time I'm going to use strung rooster saddle hackle, something called schlappen, which is another type of saddle hackle. Or if you want to get fancy, you can use the Whiting American Rooster pack. The only difference is you can see that one's there to $38 for this thing, but you get, hundreds of flies out of it. And there's all variety of sizes. So there's really big ones up here, and then there's really little ones down here at the base. So that's something that's economical if you tie a whole lot of flies. If you're only going to tie 3 or 4 of them, probably shouldn't go and spend that much money on it. But what I've done is I've just gotten some of those saddle hackles. All right, I've got, I don't know, 5 or 6 here. I'm not going to use them all, but I picked out a few that I liked so that I can show you what I look for whenever I'm tying with them. So you want to try to avoid these really wispy ones. So they're going to give you some translucence, but they don't give you a whole lot of movement. And I think they kind of get lost in the tail. You end up looking like you don't have much of a tail at all. So I'm not going to use that one. I really like these that come down to a pretty sharp taper, but they have a little bit of webbiness in them. So I think that one's pretty nice. And then I've got one that kind of matches it right here. So I'm just going to go ahead and put those two together and kind of line them up so that they're roughly the same length. There we go. Just like that. And remember, if you're measuring your fly, you kind of want to, at this point, think about how long it is. So remember, we're going to go 4 inches, so we're going to go about that far. So I want to bring these down to my side of the fly. Go just a smidge shorter. There we go. I'm going to hold them right here, and I'm just going to wrap over the whole thing, just like this. Don't have to get fancy with it. This tail is meant to move, so it doesn't have to be, if they're not exactly in there right, no big deal. And then what will happen is that they can slip out. So I cut them long. And I'm going to come back in here and I'm going to cover them with some serious thread wraps so that they can never get out. And I put all this thought into making my flies resilient. And then the first time I cast this, I'll probably cast it into a tree. So I got another kind of wispy one right here. I'm going to save that one for later. And then I've got 2 really nice ones right here. Really kind of thick ends. They're really webby. That'll work great. Put one over the other. What I'm doing is just I'm marrying them one on top of the other, just like that. See that? Got them roughly the same length. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my fly over. I'm going to look at the other side of it. And I'm going to put my tails in on this side as well. Put them in the same length. It helps you to pull some of this extra webby fiber out of the way. Going to do that. Going to hang on to it. Put a big wrap over the top and just really cinch it down. Work your way up towards the head of the fly and then pull everything up and out of the way. Clip it out. There you go. That's the tail seated. Oh, you see, I've got this kind of like a little webby fiber. You just pull those out. All right. That's it for the tail. Really get a nice thread base in there. And now we've got all these saddle hackles sticking out. Those look great. It's going to look good in the water. It's going to have a lot of movement in the tail. All right. So now I'll add in a little bit of flash, just like I did on the last fly. This is a really similar flash as well. So it's the same company, Fly Tires Dungeon. This is the H2O Pearl Baitfish in silver flash that I'm going to add in. And I like it because it has 2 colors in one, essentially. It's got pearl in there, but it's also got silver in there. And I think that's a pretty sweet mix. So I'll come in. I don't get, as you can tell already, I don't get shy with the flash. Remember, you can always clip it out if you don't want it. So I'm pulling out probably 10 pieces. And this one, I'm not going to double it up. I'm just going to find the middle point, lash it onto one side of the fly, put a second wrap on there. Then I'm going to grab it all, move it over to the other side of the fly, and wrap it onto there. So you have some on one side, some on the other, just like that. So rubber legs are slippery. Flash is even more slippery. So always come in with your glue, hit the top of that. Now what I'll do is I'll pull that flash back. Try to get this where you can see it. There we go. It's actually about the right length, funnily enough. It's just a bit longer than the tail itself. And that's about where I want it. So actually might not even have to cut this stuff. No, I don't think it's about just barely longer than the tail. I might clip off just a few fibers in here. There we go. All right, so we're done with flash. That's plenty of flash. We're going to add more in the form of the body material that we come in with. So also I was talking to Rick a little bit earlier. We were talking about being able to source this Palmer chenille. This is from Old Florida Fly Shop. So I like them. They're not necessarily local, but they have free shipping, which is kind of cool if you have to purchase a couple of things, you know, and you don't necessarily want to pay $5 to $8 for them to ship. And they've always got me my materials in a timely manner. So that's another good one to look at, Old Florida Fly Shop. I'll pull out a bunch of Palmer chenille. I'm going to work my thread back to where my tail meets where the body is going to begin. I'm going to hold that Palmer chenille down, and I'm going to create a tie-in point and just lash it on. Come all the way forward and then back. And then put a little whip finish in here because I'm going to bring the body forward by using my rotation function. You don't have to do this, obviously, you can just wrap it. But again, on this Palmer chenille, my flash is trying to get in my way. Pull it back out of the way. It has a direction that it wants to face. You want to face it to the back of the fly and then start wrapping. And at this point, you know, this Flashaboo that's kind of on the tail is pretty limp, so it's going to try to kind of find its way in. Just kind of pull it back out of the way. I'm making close, roughly touching wraps. This isn't a super important material. It's just to cover kind of the messiness on the body. You don't even have to do this step. You could totally cut this step out. But I think it makes for a little bit more dense core in the body. It will fill up with a little bit more water, and it will make it sink just slightly faster, which might be nice for if you're fishing a little bit deeper pool or you don't have a super heavy sink tip. And then just like we did with the Polar chenille on the meat whistle, we're going to trap wrap it. Camera time to focus here. There it goes. And we're going to wrap back over the top, and then we'll cut it out. Simple fly, not much to this one. I mean, we're pretty much already done. The head takes a little bit of time. So I'm going to come up just behind the eye. And I actually want to be just behind it. I'm going to do a couple more wraps till I'm really close. Okay, I'm going to move my camera because we're not as concerned about the tail now. We want to see the head on this fly. Back it up just a little bit more. Okay, now comes the bucktail work, which is probably the most tedious part of this fly, just choosing the correct bucktail. So remember, we want more buoyant bucktail now. We want the hollow part. So we want to choose the bucktail from towards the bottom. And I'm going to get 1/2 to 3/4 of a pencil. Pretty good little swath right there. Try to show you the size against my hand. There you go. Kind of brush on it until you get out all the little shorties. Okay, so now we've got relatively flat tips because I just cut it out of there flat, right? So I'm going to kind of uneven some of the tips. I just kind of cut through here to make the tips uneven because we're going to use these tips, these kind of butt ends, almost like we would when we create a fly called a bulkhead. We're going to add some bulk into the head, and it's also going to add some buoyancy. So one of the genius parts about this fly is, and I think Lefty knew this when he did it, was that if we create a collar that is longer than the point of the hook and the back of the shank of the hook, we can use that stiffer material to press down on that tail. Okay, so that tail doesn't wrap around and foul on us. So that's an important part of this fly. Now you want the collar to extend. I extend my collar at least halfway back into the tail, or maybe even a little bit more. You don't need to get shy with the length of the collar. So once I get my tie-in point, I turn it around. This is called a reverse tie. I turn it around and I hold it with my opposite hand. And then I spin my thread counterclockwise. That would be back towards the back of the fly. And then put a big wrap over the top, 2, 3, hold on to it tight. And this is why we have GSP. We're going to pull on it tight. And the GSP will not break. I'm going to work my way back a little bit and pull tight. Boom. Now we've got this splayed bucktail. We've got all these hollow fibers here to create buoyancy. And this is going to become our collar. Now, for fun tonight, I'm going to get fancy with you. I'm going to show you the 2-color version that I showed you whenever we had our completed fly, where we've got the pink underneath and the blue on top. So if we want the blue on top, we have to tie in the blue first. There's another online fly fishing place that I love to use called Spawn Fly Fishing. And they have this light blue select bucktail from Nature Spirits. And it's slightly more expensive, but man, it has great color and they're really good quality. So I'm going to use that, and I'm going to use the same area of the bucktail, at least 2/3 of the way down the tail. So down in this area. And I'm going to pull out some of those fibers, a little bit less than I did for the tail or for the collar, because we want to use 2 different colors here. But I would suggest using just slightly more bucktail in general on the top, because if you think you use a little bit more on top, it's naturally going to be more buoyant. It'll hold the fly up in position a little bit better. So I'm doing the same thing with this one, coming in here, kind of clipping those ends, just kind of making them uneven, essentially. Pulling out all the shorties. And I'm reverse tying this as well, the same length as the other. So I'm kind of looking at my lengths. Okay, that's a little long. There we go, right there. Tighten up my thread, spin it counterclockwise. Spinning it counterclockwise means that your thread wrap will face towards the back. I'm sure you guys know that. 1, 2, 3, tight, and leave it. Now we're going to come in with one more color. This is Hairline Pastel Pink. It's a little bit darker pink than I like, but this was what was available, because bucktail in these colors is a little bit harder to get a hold of. So this will work for our application. And it's really just an undercolor. And, you know, I never understood why they ate cotton candy color, you know, that pink and blue, until I saw a minnow that was dead on the side of the creek and the light was hitting it just right. And the sheen on its scales was exactly these colors. And I was like, oh, that's why. I mean, the more you can match the hatch, right, the better off you're going to be. Come in here, same length with the pink. About right there. Got this one kind of long, so I'm going to cut off some of the butts. Just a little bit of pink on top. 1, 2, 3, tight. All right, that's it there. Now we have to actually do the reversal, right? So what I'll do here is I'll work my thread slightly back towards the back of the fly by working it through the bucktail a little bit. So I'll work it through the white and through the pink, and then I'll pull it tight. So I worked it about 5 millimeters back. Now what you can do here is a couple of different things. You can use what's called a push tool. So I've got a pin that doesn't have a head, and you can stick that thing in there and just push it backwards, right? And then that will get you started. And then oftentimes, once I push it once, I'll use my hand. I'll come in with my hand and press. Hold everything back out of the way. Put a few wraps over the top and pull them tight. This is a good time where you can kind of situate the colors, press on it a little bit, come in with your whip finish. That's it, guys. You can fish it just like that. I would very much suggest putting some glue on this thing. Kind of move the colors around a little bit here. Put some glue on the head, cover up all those thread wraps. Now, the reason that I do the reverse tie, now, like I said, this wasn't in the original pattern, but what we do when we reverse tie it like this and we use kind of a fat head is we add more buoyancy. So when we fish it on a sink tip, it's going to react really erratically on the strip because it has some buoyancy in it. And also we create a little dam right here. There's a little flat spot. And so that will push water and that will make it kick left and right a little bit more. Now, if we want to see the addition of the eyes, like I had on the example one here, it's really simple to do. Another fly tire product, Real Eyes, an 8mm. Just pull out a couple of those. Stick them to my hand like this to get them, grab a hold of them easy. And then I've got Loctite super glue and Ultra Gel. It's going to come in here on the side. Put a little dab right there. Grab an eye. Stick it on. Press for just 4 or 5 seconds. Done. Come in on the other side. Same thing. Press. Now I'm going to kind of look to the side. Okay, they're relatively even. Once that dries, you're pretty much good to go. To make these things bomb-proof, I add in a flexible UV resin so that the eyes never ever come off. This is coated in that UV resin. You can see it kind of shining on camera. It's coated on top of the eyes, around the sides of the eyes, and on top of the nose of the fly. So what I use, and I absolutely love it, is Solar Res Flex. So this bottle is almost empty, actually, this big bottle. It's taken me almost 2 years to use it all. Kind of shaking it down. Start dabbing it on there. I work my way around the eye. I go behind the eye, just like this. Adding a little bit more on the underside here. Add it to behind the eye. And then right up here in the front of that thread dam, where all that bucktail is. Now this stuff is viscous, but it will run if you don't kind of rotate it. Keep rotating it. Hit it with the light. Now that can never, ever come apart. That is kind of my modern take on a classic pattern, Lefty's Deceiver.